What's going on, people? Welcome back to the A2A podcast. Today, I chat with University of Michigan gymnast Sierra Brooks. She gives us the inside scoop on when she fell in love with gymnastics, navigating the recruiting landscape as a sixth grader, and her post-collegiate goals. So again, welcome back to the A2A podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. So we're back, another A2A podcast episode. Today, sitting down with gymnast Sierra Brooks. Sierra, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your very busy schedule, even on your off day, where you're just as busy as days where you have to have that switch turned on to chat with me. But as always, as people know, we like to give our interviewees a chance to introduce themselves. So, Sierra, why don't you introduce yourself to our audience?
Yes, will do. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me as well. Just to give you a little bit of an overview, my name is Sierra Brooks. I'm a current senior at the University of Michigan on the women's gymnastics team. I'm from the suburbs of Chicago, so near Naperville, because a lot of people tend to know where Naperville is at. And then I'm majoring in business administration, concentrating near like marketing and analytics right now. I also kind of want to go the academia route at some point too, and just go back and do more school because I actually really enjoy school a lot. But I also have a younger brother who's a freshman in high school, and then just two phenomenal parents. Growing up, I predominantly only did gymnastics. I did like swimming and dance for a couple years, but then ended up specializing and only picking gymnastics from a pretty young age.
Mm-hmm. So when did you start gymnastics? Was that your first sport?
No, it was like my third. I think I did swimming first, and then dance, and then I did gymnastics like around 3 or 4. When you're little, you do like the parent taught classes, so it's like your mom is like walking in the gym with you while you like do walk on beams and stuff like that. So I started that when I was like around 3 years old, and then stuck with it. It was definitely my favorite sport pretty early on.
Yeah, and why is that? What was it about gymnastics that really kind of turned that switch on for you? Everybody kind of has that aha moment. Yours sounds like it came when you were just 2 or 3 years old. So if you can remember back that far,
right?
What was that moment where you were like, I really love this?
Yeah, I think in the beginning it was more so I just knew that I liked it more than the other sports. So it was almost like the comparison factor where if you ask my mom thought I was going to be like this pro swimmer. Like, she's like, oh, you're so strong. Like, you'll do great in swimming. And I'm like, I don't even like water. Like, I'm not doing swimming. It was good so I knew how to swim. But outside of that, I definitely wasn't something that I wanted to do competitively. And then along with that, dance too. Definitely not a dance person. But once again, like I was little just doing these things. There's no complaints. I think it's good to get the exposure. But I think with gymnastics, I just liked the fact that first of all, like there's clear levels in the beginning. Like when you're doing gymnastics, it's like, okay, you're level 1. You can like figure out exactly what you need to get to level 2. So there's very clear goals. And I think also there's kind of this sense where obviously we kind of strive for perfection. Like you try to get a 10.0 and that's great. But I think at the same time, there's also so much room to learn. Like you can get a 10 one meet, but you're still not going to necessarily be getting a 10 every single time. And there's always new skills to learn, regardless of if you're in the same level or if you're not. So it was just like a very rewarding sport, but also challenging where it never got boring. Like it's such a fluid sport. Like you could do a routine for 6 years and then that 7th year comes and you're like, time to change it. So a lot of moving parts, but just super fun to be a part of.
Mm-hmm. And it's a sport that doesn't really have the traditional path, right? Where you're being, a part of that youth program with your school. You're transitioning within high schools. And there's not a lot of high schools that have gymnastics, if any, really, in the United States. So, what was it like playing a sport and being involved in a sport where there wasn't really like that type of, I guess, support from like a high school where there's, there's the pep rallies and stuff like that. You're completely secluded from stuff like that, right? Like, what's it like growing up in that atmosphere as opposed to your friends who are probably playing softball or cheerleading or, playing football, stuff like that?
Yeah, I think that's a phenomenal question because I think that was one of the reasons I was so excited to get to collegiate gymnastics because I was like, okay, finally, like my sport in my school will overlap and I'll be competing for this school. So I think going through high school, I was someone who was very indifferent about high school, more so because of the fact that I was a very competitive gymnast. So I would leave school a little bit early to get to practice. Most of my closest friends were also like from gymnastics too. So I was not like very invested into my high school and like the high school experience. But I do think a lot of that attributes to the fact that my sport was external to it. I was one of the rare schools that had a gymnastics team, but it was very like, there's kind of this dynamic that if you're a competitive gymnast who's trying to go the collegiate route, it's very rare for you to compete at the high school level just because it's a little bit lower in terms of like how competitive it is and like the skill level. Very rare for like college coaches to come and like recruit student athletes from the high school level for our sport of gymnastics. So I knew that going in, it was fine with it. But I think as I got older in high school, I was like, okay, like the parts that kind of sucked, just that there were other athletes who were, competing for our school and just like meeting other people that we had classes with and things like that because of their sport. But I was someone who had to go to my club program to do that. So I think it had its pros and cons. Like I loved being able to be best friends with these gymnasts that I practiced with like 4 hours a day. But at the same time, I think there was a piece where I was like, okay, I am an athlete and I'm a very competitive athlete, but the fact that I can't represent my school makes it kind of challenging.
Hmm. And one of the things you just said was you would have to leave school to go to a competition or go to practice or things like that. Did that make kind of the rest of life a little tough? I mean, you're in high school at this point, right? You're in middle school at this point where things are starting to get a little bit more serious for you, and you are missing out on certain aspects of just being a regular kid
Yeah.
and having to balance schoolwork along with all of this other practice and trips and stuff like that. How hard was it for you, or was it easy for you to balance having such an elite athletic background that is separate from kind of the rest of the teenage world that you're living in?
Yeah. I'd honestly say the balancing portion was not one of the challenging pieces for me. I think we always talk about it here at my team too. Like when we are extremely busy, you only have like 2 hours to do your homework, so you do it during those 2 hours. I think we kind of talked about it earlier, but when you're just in a situation where you're like, okay, it's a day I have nothing to do today. Like I have 10 hours, all I need to get done are these two things. The two things get drug out. They take so long. It's kind of hard to find the motivation. So I think in middle school and high school, because I had gymnastics, which took up so much of my time, I was actually able to just like really commit to my academics as well and just be super driven and be very efficient. Like whenever I had short amounts of time, like I was doing my homework, I was studying, I was making sure that I was as prepared as possible for school too. So I'd say honestly that was not one of the bigger issues or just challenges for me. I think one of the challenges is more so just like the social life. Like you do not have much of the social life components of high school
Hmm.
or middle school, like dances and stuff like that. You even talked about like missing out in school. Like for instance, I graduated early from high school and I had to make the decision to like walk for graduation or to go to my nationals competition for gymnastics for like my last ever club meet, which I went to. I did not walk for graduation. But that's just like a great example there where it was like there are these trade-offs, but at the same time, like academics itself was not the issue. It was just more of like you do have these moments where when you're outside of your sport and you're just like at home one day, you're like, oh, like I wish I could have gone to that, but you kind of had your other priorities and you just have to be able to accept what you want and then not look back and just be like, oh, I wish I would have done that.
Hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of sacrifice with being an elite athlete, no matter what sport you're in. But gymnastics, there's, and we hear about it probably more so in the Olympic years than anything, where
Right.
you see Simone Biles talking about certain mental health things, and you see the things that they're going through. I can remember growing up watching the Olympics, and Dominique Dawes was one of the Olympians that I can remember watching growing up, and I'm just like, wow, like that's incredible, right? And I'm like, she's my age. She's
Yeah.
not much older than me. I think she's like 2 or 3 years older than me. And
Yeah.
and I'm a teenager. I'm like, I cannot imagine the pressure that she's under. But
Hmm.
for you, obviously you have to make a choice whether or not you're going to go that world and Olympic route or go the college route.
Yes.
Um, what was it for you that made you go the college route instead of that level four top level gymnast that wants to go to the Olympics?
That was said perfectly. Yeah, basically it's like the elite track or the club track. And I had the conversation, I'd say probably around the age of like 12, because gymnasts have to like decide very quickly if they're going to go the elite route or if they're going to go the club route, just because there's a lot of testing and like traveling that is involved with the elite like Olympic route. So basically my coach that I've had since I was like around 7 years old, I was doing very well in the club levels, and he's like, just so you know, like if you're ever interested in going the elite path, I would just be like willing to coach you, because we didn't really have any elites at my gym. Like we were very much club focused gym, and I was okay with that. But he kind of introduced that to me, and it was a pretty easy decision for me actually, because I'm someone who loves school. So I like love learning. I love actually like going to class, and I get a lot of fulfillment out of it. And one of the
Mm-hmm.
caveats with going the elite route is actually like you end up, most gymnasts are homeschooled. So I knew that I was going to potentially like miss out on that school aspect if I went the elite route. So it was kind of easy for me. I was just like, okay, if I go collegiate gymnastics path, I get to keep doing my sport. I also get to get a great education. So I kind of looked at it from that way and was like, I'm willing to go the collegiate route, which will give me kind of more of a well-rounded experience too. Because in terms of training, I'm only doing maybe like 20 hours a week instead of like 35 and 40. And I'm only traveling to meets every like 2 to 3 months instead of going to like this certain training camp like twice a month that's like in Texas without my parents. So it was just kind of those trade-offs where I was like, it's almost like a work-life balance situation. I just was like, okay, I'm not willing to potentially miss out on all these different things for the hopes of like going to the Olympics or for the hopes of going to Worlds. I thought those things were super cool, but I just knew for me, I wanted to be healthy and keep enjoying the sport and loving the sport, and I knew that I had better odds of that happening if I went the collegiate route.
Yeah. And then, for you as you're growing up and you're continuing to progress, and now you're at Michigan, but when did all of these phone calls start? Where they're starting to look for you to commit. And I had an interview with Anna Glenn, who
Mm-hmm.
I believe she was a gymnast at UCLA, and she talked about the recruiting for her started when she was middle school. Is
Yeah.
that the same thing that happened with you?
Yes. Yeah. So we were like before the NCAA finally changed the recruiting rules. I like started getting a ton of letters in the mail and like sent to my gym around sixth grade. So I think I had like a box in my room where I would just like put these letters from various schools in this box. And then the recruiting process kind of just was very hefty in middle school, not in the sense that I like wasn't calling a lot of coaches, but you definitely were at least getting like interest emails or getting letters. Like it was a lot less social media based, I'd say, like when I was going through the recruiting process. So they would send you a questionnaire, you'd fill out the questionnaire and send it back. So you at least knew which schools were interested. It definitely picked up probably like going eighth grade, going to freshman year of high school, at least for me specifically. I didn't have like a crazy recruiting experience only because it just worked out very well. Like at some point I had seen Michigan competing on TV and I was like, oh, like let me look up this school, and like looked it up, found out like how good they were academically and also athletically, and I was like, wow, that'd be a great fit. I'm from Illinois. Michigan is not that far. And then I ended up coming to one of their summer camps, hit it off, like loved the school, loved the coaches, and I just knew that it was going to be a good fit. And then also on the flip side of that, like the coaches also agreed. So it was very much like, oh, my like dream school also liked me, where I didn't have to kind of go through all of those calls with so many different schools and like let them know where I stand with them. It was a lot more straightforward. But I ended up committing in October of my freshman year of high school, so October of 2016. So that was early, and
Hmm.
I think that also attributes to why I said like I didn't enjoy high school that much, because I already knew where I was going to college for gymnastics. So it was just like, oh, cool, this is high school, but I cannot wait to leave so I can finally go to Michigan, which definitely led to me being a little less excited about like Friday night football games and stuff like that, because I was just like, oh wow, like I've already been to the big house, like I don't need to be here.
Yeah, yeah. It's tough to kind of overpower the big house when you're a high school student going to regular Friday night games. It's
Right.
quite an atmosphere there at Michigan that you're trying to compare that to. There really isn't a comparison at all. So I don't blame you at all for wanting to bypass that. But you said you commit as a freshman, but there's still a lot of years before you're actually able to leave. Um, there's different factors in there that can obviously change, right? You could knock on wood, you didn't end up injured and you didn't end up, losing anything. The coaches, that recruited you, still there, everything like that. Like, but did any of those changes go through your mind as a high school freshman thinking, okay, I'm going to commit now, but
Mhm.
there's still a lot that can change before I get there?
Yeah. I'd say I definitely was thinking about these things, not in a sense where I was like worried about these changes happening, but it was more like, okay, if this does happen, like you are aware of it, or just having it in the back of my mind. Because one thing that I tried to avoid doing in terms like when I was committing, I didn't want to go there like 100% set on like the coaching staff as is, because that's a lot of things too. Like I'm committing, like I said, freshman year. There's 4 years until I get there. Anything can happen. So I definitely wanted to make sure that I was picking a school that aligned with like my academic goals, and then also just obviously athletic too. Like you do want to consider the coaches, but I don't think it's smart to just like have all your eggs in one basket of any program or any school that you go to, because it is very fluid. And then in terms of like, yes, we are committing and it's like unofficial, like scholarships can be pulled. Like there is a lot of things that can happen, like you said, and that's I've seen that happen firsthand with various gymnasts who were committing around the same time as me with various schools, because like you said, people do get injured, and you end up seeing gymnasts who figure out like, okay, this school actually isn't where I want to go, or isn't my best fit, or actually there is a better opportunity that came up my junior year after I committed freshman year. So I'd say when I was committing freshman year, I was thinking about these things, but I definitely learned the importance of thinking about these things like the closer I got to coming, because I was seeing how other people's recruiting journeys were playing out.
Hmm. So as you're kind of navigating the recruiting process, and like you said, you did commit early, but what are the conversations that you're having with your parents about where you want to go, and weighing the options of saying, okay, I'm ready to commit to Michigan as a freshman in high school?
Mm-hmm. My parents were really good with not putting a lot of pressure on me in terms of picking a certain school. It was like I think they would look at it very objectively, like, okay, if you think you really want to focus on academics, like this is a very clear choice if you're focusing on that specific criteria. But then if you're looking at it from this standpoint, there's also this school. So it was good to have those conversations with them. And I think they, like I said, did a really good job with not putting a lot of pressure on me to make a certain decision, which gave me kind of more confidence in any of the decisions that I was making, because I didn't have that pressure from them. And then I also didn't have the pressure like from my coach, because I think that's another thing that a lot of student athletes deal with, is like where a coach is like, oh, like this huge school is like recruiting you. Like I want to see you go there. That'd be so cool. And yes, it would be cool, but also student athletes are the one who actually have to go to the school and stay there for 4 years and be part of that program. So it's more important for them to feel like it's the best fit. But in terms of the conversations that I had with my parents, I had come down to like two schools where it was Michigan and another school. And it was definitely one of those conversations where it was like, okay, where do you feel like, which school felt like home when you visited? And also, like I said too, like if you take gymnastics out of it, which school would you want to go to, and just where are you most comfortable? And I think it was just hands down Michigan. Like I knew I wanted to go to Michigan, but I think having another school gave me more reasons to actually pay attention to the small things that Michigan had, and just gave me more perspective versus just like blinders on, I'm going to go to this school.
Hmm. So once you finally get to Michigan, and as everyone knows, atmosphere is everything. You can have a certain atmosphere when you're on your recruiting trip. You said you got a chance to go to the big house. Everything is always going to be, 5-star, nothing but, 100 plus, reviews. Everything is going to be great on recruiting trips. But when you get there is when reality really kind of sinks in.
Mm-hmm.
What is it like once you finally get there? Does it solidify all of your choices that you made as a 15, 14, 16-year old and as a freshman, or does it kind of hit you with a little bit of a culture shock where you're like, okay, this is different. This is something I need to get used to?
Yeah. I'd say for the most part, it solidified it for me. I like loved the program immediately once I got there. And I think the biggest piece for me was that I loved my teammates, because I had come from a club. Our teammates were super close, but also like it's a ton of high schoolers. Like it depends on, the attitudes, the age range. It's just, it can be very different. It can be clicky. It just honestly depends on what's going on at the time. But coming into college, I was like immediately met with open arms. especially from like our sophomores and those who were kind of closer to our age gap or our class actually. And the main reason being was also the fact that since I was committed freshman year of high school, all of the girls, obviously like sophomore, junior, seniors, they were also committed. So I have known a lot of the girls that I joined the team with freshman year for like 2 to 3 years already. So just coming in and just knowing people off the bat was phenomenal. And then also just external to gymnastics, like I loved all of the professors that I had. And that has been a thing like to this day, I'm so thankful for. Like everyone is so excited about what they're teaching. They are extremely motivated and they're always willing to help students. And I think that can also be a change from like high school where sometimes they're just drained and they're not as invested in what they're teaching, but you come to college and these professors have like dedicated their life studies to teaching you about this like super niche topic. And I think that's super cool. And then in addition with that was when I committed to Michigan, I knew they had a lot of resources for student athletes and they sound great. They're like, okay, career prep and mental health and all these things. I hear this at age like 15 or 16. I'm like, okay, like cool. Sounds good. Like hopefully I use those when I get there. But I didn't realize how impactful
Yeah.
they would actually be until I was at school and like needed to use them. I'm like, okay, I need to make a resume. And like we actually had somebody who could help me with that. Okay, I'm like not feeling good. I need to talk to somebody just to kind of help get my mental health in check. All right, here's the person here. So those have been pieces that have like 100% solidified it for me because I don't know what I would have done without them.
hmm Yeah, I mean that's incredible to have so many resources at your disposal and to have your decision that you made so many years ago finally be solidified. It's always great.
Yeah.
Now, the thing that we talked about in high school with you balancing doing that whole balancing act of,
Mm-hmm.
being a teenager, academically, missing school, not even walking at your graduation because you had to go to a national meet, like all of these things are now paying off, but how do they help you once you get to Michigan and you have to do that essentially on your own? I mean, I know you just named a bunch of resources that you have, but you have to get up and get yourself to class. You have to get yourself, you have to follow your own diet plan, get to the gym, get to practice. There's all these different things despite having, a kind of a built-in family with your teammates that you do have, but how do you balance all these things and make sure that you're on time in the places you need to be and have a set schedule to get these things done?
Yeah, I'd say there's a couple things. One thing is you just have to be incredibly organized. That has been a thing where like when we have incoming freshmen now, I'm always the first one to be like, okay, like this is what tomorrow looks like, or this is what a typical week looks like with like the exact times and things like that, because you do get into a routine honestly pretty quickly freshman year, but in the beginning it is a lot to balance like, okay, if I need to be at the gym at 2, when do I take the bus to get to the gym? And then also if I need to eat dinner at this place, like how am I going to get there? And all of those like small logistical things, along with even like getting books before the semester starts. So there's a lot of moving pieces, but I'd say the thing that high school helps with a lot is like we've said, like we've been balancing academics and athletics our entire lives. So when you come to college, there's no change in that specific aspect. I'd say like, yes, there's still school. It might be a little bit harder, but we're also given assistance with like tutors and just, like I said, like professors who are really good resources and also know that we're competing for the university, which I think also adds another layer of like empathy and respect for us. Where in high school, okay, you're doing this sport, but they don't get to see any of it because it's external to your high school. So that's one big piece. And then along with that is just the support of the team, like I talked about beforehand, like just asking your teammates and reaching out. Okay, like you told me about like this that's on Saturday. What does this look like? Can you help me prepare for it a little bit? And just leaning on these people who have been through it a ton of times before. Because that's where I find myself now as a senior. I've seen these things. I've seen media days. I've seen travel days. I've seen every type of meet possible to like meets where we have 2 per weekend or just like a regular meet. And I just think that we have a lot of insight to give. So that's something that also definitely helps the adjustment because you're able to just ask these people who have seen it and are just willing to tell you because I mean you're part of their team now and it helps everyone to be on the same page. So biggest thing, like I said, being organized, leaning on teammates, and then also just continuing to do what you've been doing. Like we were also very independent. I think gymnasts are also extremely independent. I don't know why, but we talked about it a lot just on my team. So coming to college, like having ourselves accountable to get up and go to class and go to practice is never a huge challenge for us because it's also something we've been doing on our own. when you get to the gym, you have your own assignment. We're not a huge team sport in the sense that like we're not a football team that has to go and beat this other team. We compete individually, and I think that has also made us very independent growing up.
Hmm. So on from a competition standpoint, and something that basically every athlete really has to go through is that aha moment of, okay, everyone at this level is elite. I mean, I understand that you were on that club level and that where everyone was really good wherever you went, but when you get to college, you're like, everyone was recruited to be here to do what they do, and they're really good at it.
Yeah.
What was your first practice like when you got there, and how did you feel when you were just like, okay, all these girls are really legit. They're, all these guys are really legit. Like this is amazing. Like, I was it kind of overwhelming, or did you feel like you fit?
Yeah. I'd say I don't even remember how my like first practice went, but I know like that first couple weeks are definitely an adjustment with just everything going on. You're trying to adjust to classes, you're trying to adjust to like living in the dorms, and then on top of that, just these new coaches and these new teammates. And I think that in itself can be very overwhelming because you don't necessarily feel like you have control of any piece going on or that anything's like expected yet because you haven't grown to know everyone really well or grown to know like the regular schedule or just how things work. But in the gym, I would say the biggest thing that I had to adjust to was just like how tedious college gymnastics is. And that kind of leads into the part of everyone being like really, really good. I think I realized that right off the bat. And I had seen these girls compete on TV for many years. So when they started doing phenomenal skills, I was like, yeah, like everyone is really, really good here. But the part that I kind of struggled with at first was just like you're getting criticism on like the tiniest things that in club you could just get away with because like a 9.7 in club is fantastic, but a 9.7 in college is like, okay, you made the routine, but hopefully we can drop your score. And I think that was kind of a mindset shift where it was like, okay, my coaches aren't being like they aren't criticizing me like more than they are anyone else. I'm like, these upperclassmen have been here and they've gotten much better, which is why they're able to like do assignments quicker or just like adjust faster than we are. And once I understood that, I think it just helped me a lot because I was like, okay, if I want to compete and I want to be just as good as these girls that I'm seeing right next to me, then I need to just be able to like hone in on these tiny little corrections. So yeah, I think biggest thing was just being okay with the corrections in the beginning because it is kind of overwhelming. Like I said, like you just feel like you're like, okay, I'm new. Like, yeah, I don't know how this works. But on top of it, I thought I had control of my gymnastics, but then they're bringing out like new corrections that you had never heard of. But it starts to fall into place, I'd say, like right before season freshman year when your gymnastics has gotten much, much better. And it's hard for us to see it because we are the ones doing it every day. And like, yes, we know when it's getting better. We know when things are getting easier. But even talking to parents, they're like, oh my God, like, yeah, you guys are so much better than you were like literally 6 months ago. And it's just because the nature of everyone being so elite in terms of the skills that they can do and the quality in which they can do those skills that it motivates you to work harder. And then also just coaches that also want you to perform like the best gymnastics possible and they know the best way to get you there.
Hmm. So transition from that first practice or that first week where you're transitioning to that first meet. Do you feel the way you felt probably the first time you really had your first meet as a gymnast, or are the nerves a little bit different?
Definitely different nerves, definitely. So in club, like I said, like yes, you're competing under the umbrella of like a club gym, but like your performance is really all that matters. Like you just want to know what you scored all around or how you placed on these individual events. And that's it. Like, yes, they do team awards, but like it's a banner and it doesn't actually go towards anything that big or that easy to see. But versus college, like you are competing as your team and you want your team to win because it literally goes down like as your record and helps you have better placements for like conference championships and regionals and nationals. And it's so much bigger. But I'd say because of the fact that individual meets were or club meets were so individual, I was definitely more stressed and anxious before those meets because you're like only dependent on yourself. But then when we went to college meets, we were like jumping up and down, like dancing, having fun, like warming up together as a team. And I think that made me calm down significantly. And then honestly, just super excited to compete. Like when we hit season now, we all like are super excited and like counting down the days until we get to the next meet because they are so much fun. And no one really has those like high stress levels because like if I mess up, I know that my teammates have my back. They've been doing phenomenal gymnastics. Like, we can just drop my score. And I think you have that in the back of your mind now as a collegiate gymnast versus individual. You're like, okay, I messed up that skill. Like, now what am I going to do? Because there isn't any incentive to really like not only focus on yourself versus collegiate gymnastics. It's obviously like it's a huge team sport. You want everybody to perform well because it's just going to help you rise to that same level.
Hmm. And we talked about it before. You have so many resources, and one of those is a mental health resource. When it comes to performing, dieting, exercise, looking a certain way, there's so many different things. I mean, as an athlete, you have pressure because everyone's watching all the time, especially, for you because you're the only one that's out there. It's a lot different than, the 11 guys on a football field that are
Yeah.
working as one cohesive unit. You do have your team there cheering you on, but they can't really help you out there, right? And that's really, really hard to deal with. So that mental aspect for you, did you start to kind of like pick the brain of some upperclassmen when you came in order to kind of gain that mental toughness and mental health to help you get over that hump of, okay, I'm new here, this is different, and I may not be doing so well. How do I get over this hump? Or was it something that you didn't really have to struggle with?
Yeah. I'd say I didn't struggle with it significantly, but I think our program and our school does a very good job of like making us extremely aware of what mental health resources we have right when we get there. So I felt pretty good most of the year, but I knew like, okay, if something does become off or if I do have to overcome like some horrible injury, like I know somebody will be there. And I think that even gave me peace of mind because it was like, okay, I'm never going to be left hanging. There are these resources. They're right here. I could literally call them tonight if I needed to, and they'll pick up the phone to help me work through whatever problem I have. So I'd say I didn't struggle with that, and I'm really thankful that I didn't struggle with it that much. But I've seen various student athletes have to use those resources, and the they talk so favorably about them because, like we said, like you don't have those before you get to college. Like in high school, I'm like, okay, I could go rant to my mom and like cry to my mom after a practice, and she could do her
Mm-hmm.
best to console me and just like help me feel better, which is normally all that I needed. But here, it's like, okay, even if you have a rough practice, you could talk to a teammate and be like, do you need to talk to someone soon? Like, because it just might help you figure it out. And they're like, yeah, like I should probably do that. And then they do it and it helps, and it just helps avoid things lingering longer than they need to. So I would say that it's super helpful to have it. I haven't had to use it significantly, but at the same time, I'm glad I have the choice.
Yeah. And it's amazing that, college athletes and basically everyone now have that resource that they can kind of call on and get to. And, now you're in your senior year. You've had a long list of accolades. I was reading your bio page, I was reading your website, I was reading a lot about you before we got into this interview, and I'm like, man, I felt like I was on an infinite scroll, to be completely honest, as I'm scrolling through all of these different accolades and things like that. As you look at your own career, as a senior now, and obviously you have a lot more that you want to accomplish as an athlete before you can get into that post career side.
Mm-hmm.
As you look at your career and you look back on it, what kind of memories do you have that you'll take with you forever?
Ooh, that's a hard, loaded question. Hard in the sense I feel like there's so many things, and there's also so many things that come up, and you like don't realize how like big they are until they're like actively happening or until they're over. I think one thing that's like most obvious is that we won the NCAA title in 2021 for the first time in program history, and I think that's huge for me and like will never go away. One, because like it is what it is. Like we literally won NCAA's, which is something that we work to do every single year. But that was incredibly rewarding. One, because my freshman year was cut short because of COVID, and we were having a really good
Mhm.
year that year, and we never got to figure out like how we would have performed at nationals. So that was one thing that was frustrating. But like I said, made sophomore year's win so much more rewarding. But the second part was that sophomore year was the COVID year, and that was a very, very hard year for every single one of us on the team. Just having to wake up and go get COVID testing, like COVID tested before like 7 a.m. 6 days a week, and then having to sit at home in your room on Zoom classes for like 3 to 4 hours. And the only time you could really leave your house was to go to practice was just not that fun. Like I think anyone can understand that. And I think that was just a struggle for us, but it also made our team incredibly close because as we were like getting tested with each other, we knew everyone else was like negative and safe to be around. So we were able to be around each other a lot and grow incredibly close. And I think that's something that I'm going to hold with me forever, and just always knowing that I can like call up any member of that team or just any of the teams that we've had in the past few years and just talk to them about anything, because we've seen each other in every way, shape, and form. Like we've seen each other perform at their best. We've seen people have like the worst practice of their life, and we're always there. And I think we can just have a lot of empathy with each other and just be very real and honest and just open. So I'd say the biggest thing is just the relationships. And then the second piece, which is kind of still focused on relationships, is that our team chemistry is really, really good. And I think that's something, or not even team chemistry, but team culture. My freshman year, it was okay. Definitely like had its flaws here and there. But as I've gotten older and been able to kind of like step into leadership positions, I've kind of made a huge focus on us having a really good team culture, because we've seen how much that can help our team perform. And just like in the gym, our practices are going to be that much more effective when everyone is close with each other and is rooting for each other. And I think that's something that I'm just going to take away with me, because I've been able to see like how impactful it is to be part of teams that are that warm and that really want to build each other up.
Hmm. So, you mentioned this before, and I want to kind of shift to, after college type of outlook. You said, you love academics, and it's
Yeah.
something that you want to get into, and there's a lot of things that you've talked about on your website about business and stuff like that. So, when it comes to your post-collegiate career,
Hmm.
and, obviously, as athletes, we're athletes forever. That's
Yeah.
just how it is. I'll be 35 on Sunday, and I'm still an athlete now. It's not something you ever get rid of. But as somebody that has a regular job every day,
Hmm.
how much thought did you put into what your life would look like when you're not performing and you're maybe working on a computer and you're in an office? How much thought did you put into that coming into college, and then how has that progressed as you've gotten older?
Yeah. So coming into college, I was never heavily focused on what life after college would look like, in the sense that I wasn't doing like anything actively to prepare for it, which I don't blame myself for. I'm like, okay, you still have like 4 complete years of college left. Like there's not any hint of like my sport ending that soon. But as obviously I gotten older, I've been like, okay, I always hear about like this identity crisis that student athletes go through when they graduate from college or when they're done with their sport. And I hear it over and over again.
Hmm.
And I think it's inevitable to a slight degree. Like it is something that you've identified with for so long, but I've seen that, and it's kind of helped me like try to prepare for my career in the sense of like making sure that I'm getting internship opportunities, and to make sure that I'm stepping into leadership roles that might be a little bit separate from my sport, just to like see how I am in other situations, because I think it's great being an athlete, but I also think it will lead to more of that identity crisis if I like literally just commit myself to being like I am a gymnast and like I am a phenomenal gymnast and I'm all these things, but it's really good for us to be well rounded. So as I've gotten older, I've really sought out learning about myself in inside the gym and then also outside of the gym, just like finding the small things that I like to do, and also just paying attention to like what I personally want to do, which has been something that I've been more focused on literally this semester, so like senior year. Because I think we're always surrounded by so many people, even career wise, like in our business schools. I get to hear like about people who are like, okay, I'm doing investment banking, or I'm doing like this and I'm going to New York, and you hear all these things and they sound so cool, and you always like there's always some sort of comparison that any person is going to do, but I've been trying to make sure that like I'm paying attention to what I actually want to do, and that's kind of why like academia has resurfaced. Like when I was little, I used to want to be a teacher, and then I was like, I don't really like, I don't think I want to teach like a whole classroom of kids. So then I like pivoted and was like, okay, business, and I do love business. Like I love all the different classes that I've taken, but I've always been like, okay, what do I want to do with that? And I think at some point I'll probably do something entrepreneurial. What? I have no idea, but I think that's just something that will keep me busy and I'll just be excited about. But along with that, I also like learning and being able to help others. And I think the academia route gives me a really good opportunity to do that. Um, Even
Hmm.
this semester, I started tutoring for a class that I took my sophomore year, and I've gotten so much enjoyment out of it just because I've been able to like build relationships with sophomores in our business school and just help them in ways that they needed it. And I think it's been really rewarding and also kind of given me clarity in terms of like the life after college part.
Hmm. What do you, as somebody who loves academia, what do you want to study once your undergraduate degree is done?
Yeah, I think it would still be in the business realm. But I like psychology a lot and like behavioral economics. So like behavior, like the just all the decision making that people make, I think is super super interesting. So something in that realm, which also kind of blends into like marketing a lot. Um, so that's what I'm thinking. But also, all I know just generally is that it'll probably be business related, but I don't know like what subsection yet or what like truly specifically I'd be studying.
Yeah, well, that's pretty cool. I mean, there's
Thanks.
plenty of opportunity. I'm sure, with all the different things that Michigan has for each one of you students, that you'll certainly figure it out at some point.
Mhm.
Um, and now we're at our 5 questions portion
Oh yes.
of the interview. So first question for you is, what is your memory of the first time you won in college, and how did it, and what type of thoughts and feelings came to mind and came to you as you won, a meet, or you guys won as a team? What was that most memorable win that you had?
Ooh. Okay. I think we had a really good season my freshman year, so we like won most meets. But the one that is like most instilled in my brain is probably Big Fives my freshman year. So Big Five is basically like half of the Big Ten conference, and it's like a stepping stone before we hit actual Big Tens. But it was a meet that was on podium,
Mhm.
so it was kind of a little bit more formal and like just higher stakes. And we knew that we like in the place to like win this meet if we had a normal meet, but I also think we were so excited, and it was one of those meets where like everything was going well, nobody was nervous, and it was just like genuinely fun start to finish. And we won that meet, and then we got like our Big Ten regular season hats and shirts, and then like we also ended on a bye. So we like knew we won the meet, and then basically like we're in the
Mhm.
locker room waiting for the last event to finish, and we were just like blasting Kesha, and it was just so much fun because it was just we were all excited as a team, and it was something that we knew we were getting rings. Like we get rings for being regular season champions, so it was just a lot of. It was a very rewarding feeling, and as a freshman, it's like your first time going to a meet like that and seeing that many schools. Like it wasn't just a dual meet; there were like 4 other teams, so tons of fun and just yeah, very rewarding and cool to see as a freshman.
Mhm. This next question, I kind of want you to get a little bit technical and kind of in the weeds on being a gymnast.
Okay.
Um, and as athletes, we speak our own language, right? I can, as a football player, I can look at a defense, break down an offense, and do it
Mm,
technically. As a gymnast, you can do the same thing with something that you hit, some sort of technical move, something.
okay.
What is that that technique that your coach was trying to get you to hit, maybe at your freshman year, maybe your sophomore year, maybe even this year, that
Yeah.
you finally hit that technique, and you were like, okay, I did it. What was that technique? Kind of take us through that.
Ooh. Okay. I feel like I'm thinking of like 2 events. I'll say vault. So for those listening, when we run down the vault runway, hit the springboard, and then go off of the table. For my Yurchenko full and a half, I have done this skill for years, and I normally would have a good landing on them, but I didn't stick them that frequently. And in college, obviously, like you try to stick, so having like no steps at all. And one of the reasons why I'd always take a step forward is because like after I my hands hit the table, I would like snap my toes down too much instead of like keeping my toes in the air and then like waiting for my upper body to meet my toes. So that's been something for a good amount of time where like my coach was like, "Oh, that was really good, but like you snapped too much or you piked too much before you started the twist." And then finally I learned how to really be patient on that and just like, okay, I want the skill to go up more versus going out. Like distance is really good, but also there's a happy medium. Like you also need to go relatively high so it's easier for you to stick. And then at some point I was able to like finally stop snapping my toes. And then I started sticking most of my vaults. Like last season I probably had stuck the most that I had stuck in any season of my life. I don't stick every time, but it's definitely like the odds have got much, much higher. And that was probably a rewarding change because it is super small and it's not necessarily like something that's that obvious, but it's obvious in terms of like how you land the skill.
Okay, I like that. That's
Yeah,
that's
that make
interesting.
any
That's
sense.
definitely interesting. Yeah, I mean, I love the technical aspect of sports in general. I mean, sports are definitely there's an art to sports. So, I always like having some sort of technical aspect when I talk to different athletes from different walks of life. Next question is when you first started, a new skill,
Hmm.
the mental aspect of it is huge.
Oh
What
yeah.
type of, excuse the puns, but what type of mental gymnastics do you have to do in order to get your body ready to hit certain skills?
Yes. That's a good question because in the beginning, it's honestly hard to use, like in the beginning of like so when you start a new skill, it's kind of hard to use mental gymnastics because you have no baseline of how the skill is supposed to feel. So a lot of times what we'll do to try to avoid that or supplement that is doing a ton of drills. So for gymnastics, like if you're doing a skill that like goes over the high bar, you would do a ton of drills where like you're getting super close to going off over the high bar, but you don't actually do it. And then all you'd have to do from there is like actually let go, and then you would go over the bar. So there's a lot of stepping stones, and mentally, I think you have to just be able to get in the mindset where you're like, okay, I know I'm actually doing the real skill now, but I need to approach this as if I'm doing it like exactly like the drill. And I think that's when gymnasts are probably most effective and efficient with getting new skills if they've really like keyed down the separate components that make up the skill. And then also with mental gymnastics, we do a ton of it once we actually know how to do the skills. So like now, like I've been doing the routines that I'm competing now for like I think like 9 years, like a really long time because I was a level 10 for like 6 years, which basically is the same routines that I'm doing now, and then now I'm going into my fourth year. So it's been like 10ish years of the same exact routines, but they can still like go wrong and they can still go better than others. So I think mentally we do a lot of like visualization where I'll just stand there and like try to envision myself doing the routines or not even like watching myself, but just like knowing what I'm looking at. So if you're on beam, I'll be like, okay, I swing my arms here. I look down at the beam. I look down at the beam. Okay, this is how I finish. So really just knowing like what are the key things that you think about and not thinking about it in a way that kind of overwhelms yourself, but just being like, okay, I've done this before. This is typically what I think about. This is how I'm going to execute. So there's two pieces, but it really depends on like if it's a new skill or if you've been doing it for a really long time because we luck out because muscle memory is like half the reason we're able to do everything that we do now. Like, thank God for muscle memory.
Certainly, thank God for muscle memory. Next question, and this is going to be more post college, more career path. What's a goal for you career wise that you have set out for yourself?
Ooh. Good question because I keep talking about I think like I said academia, so I want to go back to school at some point and hopefully get my PhD. So that's like something that I want to do. But along with that I also do want to start my own business at some point. I have no idea like what the business will be, but I think that's also something that I definitely want to do before, I'm too old or just don't have the time to do it. I think it'd be a good challenge and also just something that gets me excited and also helps me learn more.
Mhm. So, last question, same one that everyone gets every week.
Okay.
What's a piece of advice, something that you learned from a coach or your parents, or something that you came to your own conclusion about
Mhm.
that you use on a daily basis or a weekly basis, part of that mental gymnastics that you think the next generation coming should know about?
Ooh. I'd say it's kind of two parts. The first thing is like surround yourself with people who are very supportive of you. I almost lucked out in the sense that like my head coach was like one of my favorite people ever, like always supported me, always pushed me to do better than what I thought I could. And same with my parents, like always very realistic, were never making me feel bad about what I did, but also like put things in perspective. So that's one thing. Like if you have any control, like try to make sure that like your teammates, your coaches, your parents, or whatever people you lean on are truly supportive of you because that will help you with your sport and the decisions you have to make regarding your sport, but then also outside of your sport. And the second piece I'd say is just be patient with yourself and also just be patient with life. Like I am someone who loves predictability. Like I will plan out everything to a T if I can, but I have hit certain circumstances that have like completely shocked me and been really hard to deal with at the time, but typically you learn a lot from it and they're never the end of the world. Like things blow over a lot faster than you think they do. So just being able to go with the flow to at least some degree is something that I would advise. And it's something that I have to remind myself about all the time, because I still have this tendency to want to know everything, but it's really impossible to do that with every single thing that you do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is. I mean, it never gets any easier. It really doesn't, and I think that's something that athletes deal with a lot, is wanting things to go according to plan, no
Oh, yeah.
matter the sport that you're in. You have these aspects you just want to control, and it's very hard. I mean, you can watch ESPN all you want and listen to Tom Brady or anyone else say, control what you can control.
Yeah.
I mean, it's impossible.
It's
You want to control everything.
Yep. I know. And I feel like as athletes too, we're like even if my practices, like we are taught and we've like approached every possible situation that could come up. They're like, okay, you're warming up and then this happens. So now you have less time to warm up. Like get up and show us a routine. So like we go through all of these different unexpected situations, but there's still going to be more that come up that you've never had practice with before. And you just have to learn how to be a little bit more adaptable and dynamic, even if it's not like what you prefer to do.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Completely right about that. Sierra, this has been great. I really appreciate you taking the time out to discuss your career with me. You have anything else before you go? I know you have a website. Why don't you shout that out before you go? Let us know where we can find your website, find you on social, anything else.
All right, will do. I do have a website. It hasn't been updated in a second, so I have to do that. But it's sierrabbrooks.com. And then most of my socials are also the same. So Sierra B. Brooks on Instagram, TikTok, even Twitter. I think there's just a little underscore at the end of that. But normally you're pretty safe if you just look up that username. So that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Well, we're going to be rooting for you the entire year. Hopefully a lot more of those accolades come with champion on the end of it. Good luck to you as well as the rest of the Michigan team. And, like I said, we'll be certainly looking out for you guys, and hopefully we'll see you, hitting any of the techniques that you described to us here today. So, but good luck. I really, really appreciate it. I'm going to let you go. Enjoy the rest of your day off. As you said before, that's probably more busy than having a day where you have to go to practice.
Right. Well, thank you so much. I had a lot of fun talking to you and hope that people have some takeaways from it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I think there's a lot that people can learn, and it was great. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you for listening to the Athletes to Athletes podcast. To make sure you don't miss when a new episode comes your way, head to the Athletes to Athletes YouTube page to like and subscribe, or to Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you get your podcast. Again, we appreciate you listening, and we'll see you again next time.